Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're plunging into something pretty unique and definitely thought-provoking. An idea that might just make you do a double take. Imagining a horror film centered on Jesus Christ. Now, hold on. Before you jump to conclusions, our goal here isn't to say, let's make this movie. It's really about exploring the idea itself.
Yeah.
Why even think about this? What could it possibly tell us about faith, fear, and how we tell stories? We've got some fascinating sources to help us navigate this, let's just say, sensitive territory.
It really is a topic that grabs your attention instantly, doesn't it? Because it touches something so fundamental for so many people. And, if you look at horror history, religious imagery, it's always been incredibly powerful. Think about classics like The Exorcist or The Omen. They take the sacred and twist it into something terrifying.
Right.
The genre kind of thrives on that edge, that boundary between the holy and the profane. And our sources suggest a film about Jesus wouldn't just, push that boundary. It would sort of redraw it completely. Cool. Well, instead of focusing on demons or ancient curses, which is common, this would directly engage with divinity itself. That's a whole different level.
That makes sense. And our research often points out how religious horror it resonates deeply, universally almost.
Yeah.
Why is that? What chords does it strike in us? Why does twisting the sacred create such dread?
Yeah, our sources really unpack that. It's not just about, startling you. It taps into much deeper stuff. Existential dread, some researchers call it. It forces you to think about big questions, life after death, judgment, evil, and maybe the scariest one. How solid is my own faith when things get really weird or really terrifying? And filmmakers are smart. They use symbols we already know are powerful, crucifixes, holy water, biblical prophecies.
Things with built-in meaning.
Exactly. Even if you're not religious yourself, you feel the weight of those symbols. They're baked into our culture. That makes them potent tools for horror.
Okay, so if standard religious horror uses those anxieties and symbols, here's where it gets really interesting, like you said. A film focusing on Jesus Christ himself. That's not just using symbols around the divine. It's reimagining the central figure through fear. That feels like a huge leap.
It absolutely is, and that leap is what gives it this dual potential, according to our sources. On the one hand, obviously it could be incredibly offensive, sacrilegious, even done poorly or just for shock value.
Sure, very usually.
But on the other hand, if handled with real care, real intellectual depth, it could actually be a bold, maybe even profound exploration, exploring our incredibly complex relationship with the idea of divinity itself. It can make us look at our beliefs in a completely new light.
Right. But the big question, the deep dive question for us today is how? How could a film like this even work, according to our sources? How do you take a figure of hope and put him into a horror context? Our research highlighted three really distinct, pretty provocative story paths. Let's unpack the first one. Allegorical horror. Picture this.
Right.
A small, maybe isolated town. Things aren't great there. Then a mysterious figure arrives. Charismatic. He claims to be the second coming. And at first, miracles. Sick people healed. Maybe a storm calmed. Hope returns. Seems like salvation, right?
Yeah, it starts like a redemption story. But what's fascinating here in this allegorical approach is the shift. It's subtle, unsettling. The horror isn't immediate, no jump scares right away. It's more like a creeping wrongness.
Okay.
Shadows that seem too long, whispers in empty places, and maybe the people he heals start acting strange, obsessed, unsettlingly devoted. Exactly. So the question for the audience isn't if he's divine, but what kind of divine? Is this really Christ, salvation, or is it something else? Something darker, older, just wearing the mask of salvation, slowly pulling the town apart from the inside. That ambiguity, that line blurring between hope and something sinister, that's where the terror really clicks in this version.
Chilling. Okay, let's shift gears, the second direction. Psychological horror. This one turns inward. The horror isn't out there in the town, but inside someone's mind. A believer's mind. That sounds like it could be really disorienting.
Deeply unsettling, yeah. Because it attacks faith at its source, personal experience. Imagine someone deeply devout, a priest, a nun, anyone whose life revolves around their faith. They start having visions of Jesus, but they're not comforting. They're terrifying, confusing. Is it real? A divine message? Or is it hallucination, madness? Maybe even something tricking them, like demonic deception. The viewer is trapped in that person's head, feeling their uncertainty. Is this God, or am I losing my mind? The horror is that internal battle, that loss of certainty about what's real and what's divine. It's very intimate.
Wow. Okay, and the third one, this feels like the most, maybe, philosophically challenging.
Yeah.
Cosmic horror. This suggests rethinking divinity itself.
Exactly. This connects to that bigger picture, that Lovecraftian idea of cosmic horror. What if? What if humanity has just fundamentally misunderstood God all along? What if the miracles, the resurrection, the ascension, what if they weren't acts of a loving, understandable God?
What then?
Manifestations of something else entirely, an incomprehensible cosmic force, something vast, alien, utterly beyond our human ideas of good or evil. Its actions might look like miracles to us just because we can't grasp their true nature or indifference.
So not necessarily evil, just
Yeah,
utterly other.
precisely. The fear here isn't of hellfire, but of realizing that what we worship might be something ancient, unknowable, and fundamentally indifferent to us. It kind of pulls the rug out from under everything you thought you knew about the spiritual world, a very profound existential kind of dread.
It's clear, looking at these three ideas, that this wouldn't just be about scares, if done thoughtfully. Our sources really stress the potential for digging into some incredibly deep themes, things that make you really think. Like, first off, faith versus fear. How strong is belief, really, when you're faced with something terrifying? Especially if that terror seems linked to the divine itself. It's one thing to have faith when things are calm, but what if God, or something like God, is the source of the fear? That's the ultimate test, isn't it?
It absolutely strips everything down. And then there's the nature of divinity itself. Is God good in a way we understand, or is goodness just us projecting human qualities onto something much bigger, maybe even terrifyingly alien?
It really makes you question those basic assumptions.
It does. What if the divine, without our comforting interpretations, is just vast and unknowable? Awe-inspiring, sure, but maybe also terrifying.
And then the classic problem of false prophets.
Yeah.
How do you know if a figure appears, seemingly divine, doing miracles? How do you tell truth from deception, especially when people are desperate for answers, for salvation?
That desperation makes us vulnerable, which leads to the next theme, the human need for salvation. Horror often plays on desperation. Imagine a Christ figure offering escape from suffering. How far would people go? What price would they pay? Could they, unknowingly give up everything, even their souls, to something that isn't what it seems?
These are heavy questions.
They are.
Yeah.
And exploring them through horror, it makes them hit harder somehow. It forces you, the listener, to think about your own beliefs, your doubts. How would you react? How would your understanding of the sacred hold up against something like this? It makes you see the divine not just as comfort, but maybe as awesome power, potentially terrifying power.
Okay, so we've explored these potential directions, these themes. But let's talk about the real-world implications. We have to address the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
The massive controversy a film like this would inevitably cause.
Oh, absolutely. There's no getting around it. Religious groups would likely condemn it strongly as offensive, inappropriate. Critics might question using such a revered figure for horror tropes, call it exploitation.
Right, that's almost guaranteed.
But art historically often pushes boundaries, right? It explores uncomfortable places. And our sources argue that and it's a big if it's handled with respect, even while being challenging with intelligence, then even taboo subjects can spark important conversations, necessary conversations, not just knee-jerk outrage.
That's a crucial point. I was thinking, remember the Passion of the Christ? How visceral and shocking that was. It sparked huge debates about faith, suffering, representation.
Yeah, absolutely did.
So maybe a horror take, if done with artistic integrity, could do something similar. Jolt people into asking those deep questions they usually avoid, like what would encountering the divine actually feel like? Comforting, or utterly terrifyingly awesome in the original sense of the word.
That's exactly the potential our sources point to. If done thoughtfully, it's not just shock value, it's a catalyst for re-examining our deepest assumptions about faith, fear, and divinity itself. That jolt, that challenge, that's where the real value could lie.
So wrapping up this deep dive, what we've explored today suggests something quite radical. That a horror movie about Jesus Christ, if it were ever made, and made right carefully, respectfully, yet daringly, it could be much more than just a scary movie. It could be a profound meditation, a meditation on that razor's edge between salvation and damnation, between faith and fear.
I think that's right. Horror, fundamentally, is about facing the unknown, what lies beyond our understanding. And you could argue there's no greater unknown, no deeper mystery than the concept of God itself.
A Jesus-centered horror film would force us right up against that ultimate mystery. And maybe, in facing it, we discover the most unsettling possibility of all. That the truly terrifying unknown isn't necessarily the devil, but divinity itself, stripped bare of our comforting human ideas. It's certainly something to think about, isn't it? We hope this exploration gave you some food for thought on the power of stories to probe our deepest anxieties and beliefs. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.